Hi everyone, welcome to the South Elementary Library. Today I'm going to explain a few things to you that you might want to know. One main difference from North Elementary Library to here, and I hope that you are excited to get a first-time South Elementary Library book today. So let's talk about something that's kind of important to this library. Let's talk about genrefication. So you might be wondering, that is a huge word. It's very fancy. Genrefication. What on earth does that mean? Well, genrefication means that we categorize our books, or we divide our books into sections according to their genre. So what is a genre? A genre is, well, a genre describes what type of book you are reading. We use genres to organize all of our fiction books. So I want you to think about the type of books that you like. It is probably contained in a genre, and that's how we organize our library. So let's talk about how many genres we have. We have 10 genres or categories in this library so far. We might be adding more, but right now there are 10 magical genres that you need to become familiar with. So let's take a look at this. Here's all 10 genres. I'm going to read out loud each one and the color that goes with it, because that's also very important to remember. So let's talk about fantasy, which is orange. Spooky books are red. Mystery books are dark blue. Adventure books are white. Sports books are green. Realistic fiction books are light blue. Funny books are yellow. Poetry books are pink. And fairy tale books are purple. And historical fiction books are brown. Did you pick out any genres that you liked in that list? Maybe you don't understand what separates each genre. Well, let's talk about each one of them individually, and then maybe you can decide which one is your favorite. All right, let's start with fantasy. Fantasy is orange. Fantasy books contain non-realistic elements. So they might have magic. They might have talking animals, supernatural events like time travel or aliens, or mythical beings like dragons and unicorns. So basically anything in a fantasy book really can't happen in real life. It's kind of made up, non-realistic people and situations, but they're so fun to read and they're so exciting, and they take you to an entirely different world that you can imagine being in. Just take you out of the real world. It's a really fun genre to read. You see that some people really either love it or hate it. So I'd be interested to see which one you fall into, either love it or hate it. But fantasy is our first genre in the library, and it is colored orange. All right, let's move on to the creepy or spooky books. These can either be real or fantasy. So, for example, you might have a book that has a ghost. And if it's scary, if it's a scary ghost or the situation in the book is scary, it's going to go in our creepy section. If the ghost in the book is not scary, maybe it's a friendly ghost like Casper, then I might put it into the fantasy section instead, because it's definitely not a realistic element, but it's not scary either. So that would be a good place. A fantasy would be a good place for it. But if it's scary, it goes in creepy. So we think about spooky, scary situations. We think about ghosts, aliens even, heart-pounding plots that really get your blood pumping. Those are the kind of books that go in the creepy section. Okay, mystery is dark blue. Mystery books are where you solve a puzzle or situation. There's usually something unknown that you're trying to figure out. They might be solving a crime. They're usually action-packed, and there's usually some investigations going on, secret information that someone is trying to find out. So mystery books really get you hooked. You start at the beginning, you find out the puzzle, the problem, and then it's like you can't wait to finish it to see how it all turns out. So mystery books are really good about keeping you interested and wanting to finish the book. So I really love a good mystery. All right, let's talk about adventure books, which are white. These books are action-packed from start to finish. There's going to be a lot of suspense. There's usually survival and outdoor stories, secret agent stories where they're having to go around the world to work for someone or do some kind of interesting job. They're really page turners. Lots of excitement in adventure books. Within the adventure genre, you might find books that are realistic adventures, like maybe a story about a kid who's trying to be the youngest person to climb Mount Everest, and he gets stuck on top of the mountain. That's an actual book that I have. Or maybe it's a book about a group of kids who are fighting some zombies, but it's really full of adventure and excitement. So that type of book would be found in adventure too. So lots of different types of books, but they're all very exciting and action-packed. All right, how about sports fiction? If you are a sports fan, this is the section for you. These would be made-up stories about different sporting events. So it could focus on a specific sports team or a sports game. But the best part about sports fiction books is there's always a lot of competition in the plot. So they're trying to win a game, or they're trying to win a tournament, or whatever the case may be. There's all different sports represented in my sports fiction section. You can read stories about football, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey. But keep in mind that all of these books would have stories in them that are not real. So you're not going to find, you can't go to the sports fiction section and find a book about Dallas Cowboy facts, because that would not be fiction. But you could find a book about like a little junior league football team coming from behind trying to win the state title. That's the kind of book that you would find in the sports fiction section. Okay, realistic fiction. This is my personal favorite. Realistic books are just like it sounds. They are set in modern time, so now. They have realistic characters. They have realistic events and characters that you can relate to. So in other words, when you read a realistic fiction book, it just feels like it could happen to you. There's no magic. There's no crazy stuff going on. It's really just real life in a good story. Sometimes they deal with school. Sometimes they deal with friendships or family matters. A lot of times realistic fiction books are kind of sad, because real life can be sad sometimes. So sometimes they are sad, but they can also be funny. But mostly they are real. And that's the main, that's what would be the main adjective to describe realistic fiction, is that they're real. All right, the funny books. Everybody loves a good funny story, so it's pretty easy to pick out the funny books. These are laugh out loud stories. They usually have a really funny plot, really silly, lighthearted story. There's not usually a whole lot of sadness in a funny book. They're just really laugh out loud funny. And we have a great funny section, so I'm looking forward to you checking those out. Historical fiction. These are books based on real time periods, but the stories within them are made up. So for instance, it's going to be set in a historical time period. It might feature characters from history, so you might see Abraham Lincoln show up in a book, but generally the other characters in the book are not real. The events in the book did not actually happen, although they may be based on some truth. I have a lot of war books. I have pioneer books. I have books representing all different time periods in history. And those would be found in the historical fiction section. And you can learn a lot from those books, from reading about stories within a certain time period. Okay, poetry books. That's pretty self-explanatory. Poetry books can be big or small. Sometimes they tell a story through different poems, and sometimes each poem is a different thing altogether. Sometimes the poems don't even rhyme. But to be considered a poetry book in our library, all it has to do is have poems in it. So I have different types of poetry books, but they are all grouped together in the poetry section, which is pink. All right, fairy tales is purple. Fairy tale books are traditional tales. They may have fantasy elements, but they have familiar characters and situations. What that means is we're talking about Cinderella stories, Snow White, Grimm's fairy tales, things that you are used to hearing. There might be different versions of them, but those all go in the fairy tale section. We kind of keep them separated. So yes, they may have fantasy elements, princes, princesses, dragons, and things like that. But if they're a traditional tale that's been passed down for many years, it goes in the fairy tale section. Okay, so that kind of sums up all 10 of our genres. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, that's all good, but how do you find one of those books in the library? So I wonder, as I went through the list, did you pick out your favorite genre? Do you remember what color it was? So here's the deal. All of our books are labeled with the genre color at the top of the spine. So there's a picture there. You can see all of those books are labeled with an orange strip at the top of the book. That means that all of those books are fantasy books because the fantasy section is labeled orange. So all of the fantasy books will be grouped together on the shelf. And each color is grouped together on the shelf. That's what I just said. So you can see there's the adventure books. They are all white at the top. You can see there's a bunch of them right there. And you can also see on the left of that picture, there's a little sign that points to the adventure section and sort of tells you what types of books that you can expect in that section. Each genre section has its own label right at the beginning of the section that kind of tells you what to expect. So that's pretty helpful too. Oh no, and I almost forgot. Can't forget these. We have a few other types of books that don't have colored labels at the top. Remember, I only label most of my fiction books. So, for instance, nonfiction books don't have a color at the top. They go in their own section. Nonfiction books are going to tell you information about lots of different topics. You learn things from nonfiction books, facts, and things like that. They are located in the nonfiction section on the back wall of the library. Also, biographies. Those are informational books about people. So if you want to read about famous presidents or people who invented things or lots of interesting people in history, you would head to the biography section, which is across from the nonfiction section. I also have some graphic novels. These are not labeled with a specific color either. So graphic novels are comic book style stories of all different types. They can be realistic, they can be fantasy, they can be all kinds. But what makes them a graphic novel is that they look like a comic book when you look at the inside of them. So they're told with mostly pictures and some words. Those books are located underneath the television, right in the middle. And I also have some picture books. Picture books are short, interesting fiction stories, and they are located next to the graphic novels underneath the television. They are great fun reads. You can read them really fast, and they are also mostly pictures. All right, guys, you are now ready to choose your very first book from the South Elementary Library. High five, everybody. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'm so excited to help you out today. All right, guys, I hope you have a fabulous first day in the South Elementary Library.